On this spring morning, many centuries ago, the Roman army of occupation prepares to deal with what it has been warned is a threat to its tonight. Its legionnaires have arrested a Jewish troublemaker charged with treason against the state and claiming to be a king. For revolutionaries, Roman justice can be impatient and swift. In less than 2 hours, this prisoner will be tried and condemned. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. On this day, the first Palm Sunday, more than 1900 years ago, Jesus of Nazareth began his last week on earth. Not then, but in the years to come, it would be revealed as an epical event, a turning point in the life of Western man, determining much of our history, our thoughts, and coloring all our actions. At his death, not many believed him to be the long-awaited Messiah, the Christ sent to announce the coming of God. Most of the civilized world had not yet heard of him. In this retelling of his passion and death, we have recreated, often at the original sites, that moment in time, as the newsreel camera might then have recorded it, and as it might have been witnessed by believer and non-believer alike. Parts of the history are fragmentary, parts still debated by scholars of religion, Protestant, Catholic, Jew. For history is silent, let each man's faith speak for itself. Yet faith sometimes can be a dangerous thing, threatening established authority. Faith, Jesus said, can cast a mountain into the sea. At least some of his followers hoped that mountain was Roman power. In this Passover season, as they prepare to celebrate their deliverance by Moses from Egyptian captivity, the Jews are again in bondage in their own land. For nearly 100 years, Jerusalem has echoed to the clang of Roman armor. Alien warriors strengthened the garrison of the fortress Antonia, held like a Roman fist against the heart of the city. From his coastal headquarters, the Roman procurator for Judea, Pontius Pilate, also comes to Jerusalem for the holy holiday. The 200,000 Passover pilgrims here to worship their God need to be reminded who holds the real authority.
No foreign ruler is popular. The Empire of Rome wasn't built on popularity, it was built on power. Still, we try to be discreet. As much as possible, we govern through existing institutions. Here, for example, the priesthood. We try not to interfere so long as they behave themselves and pay their taxes. This man Jesus? Yes, I've gotten reports. These Galileans are mad. They're always producing healers, prophets, messiahs. Up out of the desert with stories of some god they found, eating locusts, staring into the sun, seeing visions. Any illiterate peasant can come along and claim that he's fulfilling the prophecies, and there are always enough fools to believe him. We know how to deal with them.
Already Pilate has shown how to deal with troublemakers. Empowered with jus gladi, the right to inflict death sentences, he has used it ruthlessly and often. At Caesarea, in one of his first acts as procurator, he slaughtered the Jews who protested his secret importation of graven images. When the Jews complained against his arbitrary rules, Pilate sent disguised soldiers into the very temple itself to kill them. hating the Roman, many are eager to rebel. Yet, as in other oppressed nations, a few have made an uneasy peace with him, if only to protect the temple, hearthstone of the Jewish people. For the temple is not only the citadel of their God, it is the center of all their hopes and actions. Here are the leaders and custodians of the Jewish faith, the repository of its history and law. Today, under the eye of a watchful conqueror, that law and its rituals have become even more sacred, an inner tie, a symbol of Jewish unity amid hostile forces. Fortress and temple exist in suspended balance. While ordinary Jews labor under the occupation, Roman procurator and Jewish high priest have made a wary compromise, an arrangement of privilege. For lesser citizens, there is no arrangement, only duties. Obey and pay taxes. For the poorest, there are only God's mercy and man's charity. Often it is not enough. Much of the holy city is hungry slum. In the countryside, even amid the lush valleys and teeming waters of Galilee, the people are poorer still, drained by endless tithe, tax, and tribute, victims of the hated publicans who gather taxes on commission for the Roman. Debtors must sometimes sell themselves as slaves. Empty-handed amid plenty, robbed of their sweat, the poor find safety in silence. They endure. Though they are sure they are the children of God, he often seems to have forgotten their names. Yet of late, God has become closer, almost a neighbor. They say his son stays often in nearby Capernaum with a handful of young apostles, most of them simple fishermen from Galilee. Carrying their worldly possessions upon their backs, poor as other listeners, the 12 have left net and bench to follow Jesus as he begins his ministry. For a year or more, they have trudged the length and breadth of Galilee and even beyond, while Jesus preaches love of God and love of man. In village street and synagogue, in field and country crossroad, on seashore and mountain, Jesus brings the promise that God soon will deliver the oppressed from their misery. Blessed are you poor, he tells them, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are you that hunger now, for you shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. By parable and example, as they wander from village to village, Jesus teaches his apostles. They find food and shelter wherever men willingly open their doors. But not all welcome Jesus. There are those who fear him and ridicule him. One of his apostles, Thomas, tells of hostile encounters.
Yes, he has been threatened often. They even turned him away from his own village of Nazareth. They accuse him of breaking the Sabbath, of eating with tax gatherers and sinners, of committing blasphemy, speaking as if he were God himself. It's laughable. Would God live like this? Yet maybe he does. Jesus says we must give up this world to be ready for the kingdom of God. To some people that's afraid. They're afraid they lose property or position. So they hate him.
Yet like a fire, the words of this new rabbi pass from man to man, village to village, and the people follow. For they have heard of his power to heal lepers, cripples, epileptics, the blind, and every kind of affliction. That in Capernaum Jesus commanded a paralytic to walk, and the man walked. It is said that he can calm the sea and walk upon it, that he has fed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. It is said that even death obeys him, that he has raised his friend Lazarus from the tomb. He also has resurrected the hope and dignity of ordinary men. Though he has not publicly claimed it, many believe him to be the promised Messiah, the Christ, bringing the end of the world, the victory of life over death, of love over hate. Now, boldly on this triumphant Palm Sunday, with his rabble from the hill towns of Galilee, Jesus has come to Jerusalem, to the very citadel of its ancient faith, to the poor, to leper and whore, to sinner and outcast. He has opened the gates of heaven. But some fear he threatens the gates of earthly power, that the man of love may become the instrument of the people's hate, the spearhead to overthrow the Roman. They fear that such an attempt will plunge the nation into disaster. Among Jesus' adversaries is one man, himself appointed by the Romans, the high priest Joseph Caiaphas.
Jesus raised difficult questions. Many thousands of Jews had come to Jerusalem for the Passover, but none as he did like a conqueror. What did he want here? Did he truly claim to be the Messiah? Was he preaching reform or revolution? The end of all worldly authority? Obviously, such ideas were dangerous. They affected all our arrangements with the Romans. Our national existence was at stake. Jesus was kept under close watch. Even then, I hoped he wouldn't carry his pretensions too far. Hoped to avoid a confrontation that would involve the Romans. But he did. I think even Jesus knew there could be only one outcome.
No less practical, Roman forces stay on the alert. No one knows better than Pilate that the Passover pilgrims all love God and all hate Romans. If the spark of insurrection sweeps the city, the first victims will be his own men. But there are other possible victims. The threatened consequences of a collision between Jesus and the authorities have already been weighed by one man. His name is Judas.
We should not have come to Jerusalem. In Galilee, the world was smaller. We were bigger. Here, all the measures have changed. In the temple, even Jesus seems small. Never have I seen anything so great, so powerful. It makes one afraid. And if they seize Jesus, what will they do to us, his disciples?
Undismayed by threats, Jesus turns his anger on Caiaphas' clique, charges they perform ritual without its meaning, that they profit on religion, observe the law but not its spirit. Now craftily Caiaphas' men try to unmask Jesus as a pretender, entrap him in blasphemy. Beneath the dialogue of good and evil, Jesus knows the issue is life and death. Under the rule of God, his inquisitors ask, is it lawful to pay tribute to Caesar? And knowing their intent, Jesus replies, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Why, they demand, does he consort with notorious persons, with sinners and tax gatherers? Because, Jesus responds, only the sick need a physician. Asked which is the greatest commandment, he answers, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The attempt to entrap Jesus fails. With each answer, he gains strength, new followers. In the priesthood, even in the Supreme Council, some have begun to believe. Among them, the man Nicodemus.
I have listened. I have thought much on it. This is a great and holy man. I have not yet said this publicly, but truly, I believe he is the Messiah, Son of the living God. Many think differently. They believe in a false prophet. Sometimes even I feel Jesus is too bold, too provocative. Perhaps truth is always provocative. And yet, the authorities must react, and they will.
Against the dangerous power of the word, against a coming storm, Pilate brings in more Roman armor. Each day before nightfall, the man who has raised the storm escapes the dangers of the city. Jesus has been warned of the plots against him, that not daring to arrest him among his followers by day, his enemies may seize him in darkness. Through the gate he entered as a savior, he leaves almost as a fugitive to find safety on the Mount of Olives. Around him are the 12. They have traveled the stony trails of Galilee and Judea with Jesus. They have witnessed his triumphs, seen him shake the power of Jerusalem. But Jerusalem has not fallen, and now they are filled with foreboding. Later, Peter remembers.
I did not know what would come. Each day they plotted and tried to entrap him. And he knew. Our Lord knew well what they are trying to do. 3 times, when we were coming up to Jerusalem, he told us that there he would be mocked and scourged and put to death. Long before, here in Galilee, he spoke of a seed that must be buried in the earth and died to bring forth new life. I felt helpless. He rebuked me when I tried to hold him back.
Now, while his apostles tremble, Jesus makes his strongest attack, cursing Caiaphas and those who have made the temple a den of robbers. The man who has counseled against violence commits violence. The challenge of Jesus has been heard. Now there is no turning back. But Caiaphas faces other humiliations, these at the hands of the Romans. On Thursday of Holy Week, like a supplicant, he must come to the Roman procurator to receive the most sacred ceremonial vestments of his office, robes he is permitted to wear briefly only on the highest holidays. Pilate is well aware that he and Caiaphas are joined by a double bond, their mutual hatred of each other, and by their need. What threatens the high priest threatens the procurator. Fearful that harsh measures against Jesus may bring an uprising in Judea and a rebuke from Rome, Pilate prefers that Caiaphas act against the upstart. Let the Jew take the blame. Trapped between Roman power and religious rebellion, Caiaphas knows that hour by hour his prestige and authority are being sapped. Jesus must be removed. But by whom and how? This morning, Jesus does not go to Jerusalem. He stays quietly in Bethany at the home of Simon, the leper now healed. Like one preparing his departure, Jesus talks with his apostles. He is weary. The road from Bethlehem has been long and hard. Now he must face the last supreme trial. He receives a few old friends, such as Mary and Martha, sisters of Lazarus. He tries to prepare his mother for what will come. Seldom together since his ministry, all their meetings seem farewells. Simon remembers.
He knew. I think we all knew, but didn't want to admit it to ourselves. There was such a glow of life about him. It was hard to connect him with death. The last night here at Bethany, one of the women anointed his head and feet with a jar of spikenard. Very costly. Someone I I think it was one of the disciples said it would have been better to give the money to the poor, but Jesus answered that there was a beautiful thing she had done. She had anointed him to prepare him for the burial.
Amid the Passover, there are other preparations afoot this night. At the house of Caiaphas, there are anxious consultations on the crisis precipitated by the man from Galilee. What will the Roman do? Behind the grim walls of the Fortress Antonia, the Roman is armed and ready. But the procurator is silent. It is reported that he meets secretly with Caiaphas, but there is no statement or public confirmation. Later, Pilate's aide remembers the night.
I don't know what they talked about. Pilate wasn't in the habit of telling me his plans. All I knew was that we'd been placed on alert for a special duty. So some kind of decision had been made. There couldn't have been a better time for the arrest. Streets were empty. All the people were indoors for Passover. I never did understand all the tumult about that man Jesus. They said he claimed to be king of the Jews. He didn't look like much of a king to me, especially later.
Across the city from the Fortress Antonia, Jesus too has come into Jerusalem for the Passover feast, but hardly as a king. One by one, as a final lesson in humility and service, he washes the feet of the apostles, even Judas, who already has arranged to betray him. Now with his apostles in the upper room, Jesus shares the bread and wine, which is to be known through the ages as the Last Supper. He dismisses the apostle who he knows is ready to sell his life. In this room, it is believed that Jesus of Nazareth shared his Last Supper on earth with his apostles. It was both his farewell and his bequest. He was certain that at any moment he would be seized by his enemies. The few who believed him the Messiah were unaware of the dangers against him. Only the apostles were with him, and even they not for long. Soon they too would fall away from him in fear and trembling. Peter had sworn to lay down his life, but Jesus told him that before the cock crowed in the morning, Peter would deny him 3 times. At midnight, Jesus and the apostles made their last journey together to the little grove of olive trees called Gethsemane. Now, under cover of darkness, guided by Judas, the opponents of Jesus strike at last. Captured by an armed force as if he were a dangerous criminal, Jesus is seized and bound and led away. The man, both hailed and accused as the Son of God, is now defenseless among his enemies. Denied, even by Peter, his friends have vanished. He must go the rest of the way alone. At dawn, Friday, Jerusalem greets the first light of a new sunrise. For one man, it will be the last. Questioned in the night by Caiaphas and his supporters in the Sanhedrin, the prisoner Jesus is led for trial at the Fortress Antonia. He is taken by circuitous routes not to arouse his supporters, most of them unaware that he has been seized. A crowd trails him, but it's unlike the others that have followed the man from Galilee. This is a mob, with a mob's hate searching for a victim. Behind Caiaphas, the obedient crowd is prepared to play its prescribed role. For it is said that the crowd has been gathered for this occasion and rehearsed in its responses. It is said that the hearing itself is a mock trial, a conspiracy among the collaborationist high priest Caiaphas, the Roman procurator Pilate, and their instructed audience. The verdict cannot be left to chance. Quickly from Caiaphas and his clique, Pilate hears the three charges he already knows. Jesus, they say, has perverted the people. He has urged them not to pay Roman taxes. He has claimed to be their king. For blasphemy against God, Pilate cares little. But a rebellion against Rome he has had more than enough. Yet he must be cautious. Harshness may bring an explosion. For the first time, Pilate sees the backcountry Messiah of whom he has heard much. He is a frail, unimpressive rival. Yet Pilate knows that kings of the Spirit can soon contest the power of earthly kings. "Are you," asks Pilate, "the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answers, "You have said so." But to the other charges, Jesus is silent. It is mid-morning, and Jesus has just condemned himself. Yet in killing this beloved rabbi, Pilate can shrewdly gain political capital. Knowing well the response the controlled crowd must give, he can make a cynical public gesture of compassion. As part of Passover custom, he offers to release a prisoner. Which shall it be, Jesus or Barabbas? But what, asks Pilate, shall be done with the King of the Jews? And the crowd shouts, "Crucify him." Now, as the terrorist Barabbas is freed, Jesus sees for the first time the man for whom his life has been exchanged. Having shifted blame, Pilate now washes his hands and orders Jesus to be scourged and crucified. Later, before he himself vanishes into obscurity, Pilate remembers.
Power must sustain itself or die. Jesus constituted a threat to the entire power structure through which we rule the country. Personally, I think he was determined to die, to make a martyr of himself. Always a danger with a popular figure. We had no choice, finally. Execution can be a remarkable deterrent, and it did demonstrate convincingly that he was quite human after all. Despite all the miracles and magic tricks, the nails held. Of course, we scourged him first. The soldiers call it the halfway death.
Indeed, Jesus seems mortal as any man. He recoils from the lash, cries out in agony. Sometimes under the whip, men die. But Jesus must be kept alive to prolong his death. Now they mock him. Life far from Rome can be dull. The soldiers welcome a little sport. Exhausted, racked with pain, Jesus is given the burden for his final journey. He carries not the full cross, but only the bar to which he would be nailed, then fixed to the upright post at the place of execution. Now at last, with the two thieves who also will be crucified this day, Jesus is led forth. It is an hour before noon. way to Golgotha is long and steep. Custom requires the procession of the condemned to provide a public example before each prisoner assigned tells his name, the crime for which he is to die. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, has been dictated by Pilate. But as Jerusalem celebrates Passover, only a few of Jesus' followers are yet aware that their Lord is about to die. Along the road, a familiar figure waits. Summoned by one of Jesus' apostles, Mary has come to witness the crucifixion of her son. Chance pilgrim to the Passover, Simon of Cyrene, is forced to take the load that Jesus can carry no farther. Among the watchers, even Jesus' followers are silent, fearing Roman retribution. Yet one dares to comfort the condemned. At Golgotha's summit, all is ready for the procession of victims. Here at the place called the Skull, Jesus reaches the execution site outside the city he entered 6 days ago in triumph. Now, only a handful of the loyal and the merely curious remain. Crucifixion is perhaps the cruelest death and the most humiliating. Reserved by the Romans for slaves and those guilty of the most offensive crimes. Supported not only by the nails, but by ropes to prevent their twisting free, the condemned often live for several days in agony before death frees them. By custom, Jesus is offered drugged wine to dull his torment. He refuses. Between the two thieves who are his fellow victims, Jesus is at last raised upon the cross. It is noon. Although Jesus is already in extremity, death may be long in coming. There is now nothing to do but wait. As a few of the curious begin to drift away, the Roman soldiers gather the tools of their grim carpentry. Afterward, one of the executioners remembers.
Men die much the same. I've seen a lot, it's my trade. I've forgotten most. But this man Jesus, I remember. He refused a drug to ease his own suffering, and yet he tried to make it easier for the others. Told one of the thieves that soon they'd be together in paradise. When you are dying, even a lie can soothe the pain. I think the thief believed him, but I have wondered sometimes about Jesus. Did he believe it?
On Golgotha, the hours pass one by one into eternity. The soldiers, as is their customary right, gamble for the garments of the condemned. The legs of the two thieves have been broken to hasten their death. But for Jesus, it is not necessary. His strength is nearly gone. Then Jesus cries out. A sponge of vinegar is raised to his lips. The crowd waits. Perhaps at last the miracle will happen, and Jesus will be lifted from the cross. But the sign for which the crowd waits does not come. Again, Jesus speaks. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. It is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He who is called the Son of God is dead. Jesus of Nazareth is no longer a danger to anyone. On such a hill outside Jerusalem, Jesus of Nazareth was crucified and then entombed close by. But that is not the end of the story. If it were, there'd be no Christendom. It's the faith of Christians everywhere that Jesus gave his life to redeem men from sin. That he arose from the tomb on the third day, the day we now call Easter. In the story of the resurrection lies the Christian belief that life, not death, must triumph.